In the last video, we explored how this cognitive function appears in the conscious mind through the hero, parent, child, and inferior functions. But the story doesn't end there. The same cognitive function also exists in the shadow. It doesn't become a different function. It simply becomes less conscious, less trusted, and often reveals itself in very different ways. Let's take a look. Part 1. The function in the shadow. In Part 1, we explored extroverted sensing as a conscious tool. Whether it appeared as a hero, parent, child, or inferior function, it was still something the person recognized as part of themselves. They might have been confident with it, responsible with it, playful with it, or insecure about it, but they were at least aware that it existed and could intentionally engage with it. Once extroverted sensing moves into the shadow, that relationship changes. The function itself doesn't become different. It still gathers information from the immediate environment, notices tangible details, reacts to what's happening right now, and focuses on direct experience. What changes is the person's trust in it. Instead of feeling like a familiar tool, it becomes something that operates from the background. Because of that, extroverted sensing often appears less by choice and more as a reaction. It tends to surface when life becomes stressful, uncertain, or emotionally charged. Rather than comfortably engaging with the present moment, the person may become overly cautious of it, overly critical of it, confused by it, or only access it during moments of extreme psychological pressure. One interesting thing about extroverted sensing is that it's rooted in reality as it exists right now. It notices what can actually be seen, heard, touched, and experienced. When that ability is pushed into the shadow, a person often develops a complicated relationship with the present itself. They may second-guess what they're observing, distrust their own reactions to the environment, or swing between ignoring immediate reality and becoming suddenly consumed by it. Exactly how that relationship changes depends on where extroverted sensing sits within the shadow. The first place we see it is as the Nemesis Function, where it becomes a source of worry and insecurity. Part 2. Nemesis Function. For ISFJ and ISTJ, extroverted sensing occupies the Nemesis position. The Nemesis function often feels like something that can't quite be trusted, but also can't be ignored. It stays in the background, quietly asking, "What if I'm missing something happening right in front of me?" With extroverted sensing in this role, there can be an ongoing concern about staying aware of the immediate environment. These individuals may worry that they're overlooking important details, reacting too slowly, or failing to notice changes that everyone else seems to catch instantly. Ironically, this worry can make them more observant than they realize. Someone with extroverted sensing as a nemesis may repeatedly check whether they packed everything before leaving the house. They may double-check directions even after they've already confirmed them. While walking through an unfamiliar area, they might constantly scan their surroundings, not because they're naturally thrill-seeking or highly alert, but because they're worried they could miss something important. The concern isn't simply about physical objects, it's also about responding appropriately in the moment. Imagine a fast-moving conversation where everyone is improvising. Someone with Nemesis extroverted sensing may worry they're reacting too slowly or failing to pick up on subtle changes in the room. Afterward, they may replay the interaction wondering whether they should have noticed something sooner. This can also produce defensiveness when other people appear overly spontaneous. Someone who acts without much planning may seem reckless because they're placing so much trust in immediate experience. The Nemesis user may question whether enough thought has gone into the decision, even while secretly wondering whether they're being too hesitant themselves. Because Nemesis functions create suspicion, there can also be skepticism toward appearances. They may wonder whether what they're seeing tells the whole story. Just because something looks obvious doesn't mean it actually is. That suspicion can be healthy in moderation, encouraging careful observation rather than blind acceptance. As they mature, many people become more comfortable acknowledging that they don't need perfect awareness of every changing detail. They can learn to trust that missing one small thing doesn't automatically lead to disaster. Extroverted sensing becomes less of a constant worry and more of a useful backup when immediate action is genuinely needed. When extroverted sensing moves one step deeper into the shadow, however, worry often transforms into criticism. Part 3. Critic Function. For ESFJ and ESTJ, extroverted sensing occupies the critic position. The critic function tends to evaluate everything through a harsh internal standard. It often points out flaws before strengths, and those criticisms may be directed both inward and outward. With extroverted sensing in this role, the criticism often revolves around how people interact with the physical world. The person may become frustrated by impulsive behavior, poor awareness of obvious details, or what they see as careless reactions to the present moment. They might think, "How did you not notice that?" Or, "Why would anyone make a decision without paying attention to what's right in front of them?" Everyday mistakes that involve observation or immediate action can feel surprisingly irritating because the critic function notices them so quickly. The interesting part is that this criticism frequently turns inward as well. If they overlook something obvious themselves, they may be much harsher on themselves than anyone else would be. Missing an exit while driving, forgetting an item at the grocery store, or accidentally dropping something might produce an internal response that's far more severe than the situation deserves. Because extroverted sensing isn't fully trusted, perfectionism can develop around it. They may feel they should always be fully aware of everything happening around them, even though that's an impossible standard for anyone to meet. Every oversight becomes evidence that they weren't attentive enough. Sometimes this criticism extends beyond simple observation and into lifestyle choices. Someone may become judgmental toward people they perceive as living recklessly, acting without discipline, or constantly chasing stimulation. Yet underneath that criticism may be frustration with themselves whenever they feel tempted to simply enjoy the present instead of staying focused on responsibilities. Growth comes from recognizing that awareness isn't measured by perfection. Nobody notices every detail, and not every spontaneous decision is irresponsible. By softening the critic's impossible standards, extroverted sensing becomes less about constantly finding mistakes and more about making practical adjustments when they're actually needed. Moving even deeper into the shadow brings us to the trickster, where certainty gives way to confusion. Part 4. Trickster Function. For INTP and INFP, extroverted sensing occupies the trickster position. The trickster is often described as a blind spot because it creates misunderstandings without the person realizing they're happening. It's not simply weakness, it's inconsistency. Sometimes the function seems to work perfectly, while other times it completely misleads them. With extroverted sensing in this position, people can struggle to accurately interpret what's happening in the immediate environment. Their attention is often pulled toward internal analysis, possibilities, meanings, or personal values instead of raw sensory information. Imagine someone becoming so absorbed in a conversation inside their own head that they completely miss another person calling their name several times. Or they walk into a room searching for an object that's sitting directly on the table in front of them, yet somehow they don't see it until someone points it out. The confusion isn't limited to physical objects, it can involve timing as well. They may underestimate how long something will actually take because they're focused on concepts rather than immediate realities. They may miss subtle physical cues that a conversation is becoming uncomfortable, only realizing it after the interaction has already ended. Mixed signals become common because they may assume others are paying attention to the same things they are. While someone else notices body language, tone of voice, and changing expressions, the trickster user may be focused entirely on the ideas being discussed. Both people leave the conversation believing something completely different happened. Ironically, they may also unintentionally confuse others. They might appear absent-minded one moment and surprisingly observant the next. Friends may wonder why they notice incredibly obscure patterns, yet completely overlook something sitting directly beside them. As self-awareness grows, they don't suddenly become masters of extroverted sensing. Instead, they learn to pause before assuming they've accurately perceived the present moment. Simple habits like slowing down, checking their surroundings, or asking clarifying questions help compensate for the blind spots without needing to fundamentally change who they are. The deepest shadow position, however, is very different. Rather than creating ongoing confusion, it often stays dormant until life becomes overwhelming. Part 5. Demon Function. For ENTP and ENFP, extroverted sensing occupies the demon position. The demon function usually remains hidden for long periods of time. Many people barely notice it in everyday life because their personality naturally relies on other ways of interacting with the world. But under extreme psychological pressure, when their usual approaches stop working, the demon can suddenly emerge. With extroverted sensing in this position, a person may become consumed by the immediate moment in ways that feel completely unlike their normal personality. Instead of exploring possibilities or thinking about what could happen next, all attention collapses onto what's happening right now. This can produce impulsive reactions that surprise both themselves and the people around them. Someone who normally enjoys exploring options may suddenly demand immediate action. They may become unusually confrontational, reckless, or intensely focused on controlling the physical situation around them. It's as though the pressure has forced all long-term thinking aside, leaving only an urgent need to respond to the present. Sometimes this appears as sensory overload. Every sound feels louder. Every interruption feels more irritating. Small physical inconveniences that would normally be ignored suddenly become impossible to tolerate. The environment itself begins to feel hostile because the demon function is operating without the balance that conscious awareness normally provides. In other situations, the demon can drive destructive attempts to force reality into submission. Instead of adapting to circumstances, the person may try to overpower them through immediate action, believing that doing something, anything, is better than feeling trapped. Fortunately, demon functions are not permanent states. They usually fade once the crisis passes and the person's preferred functions regain control. The danger comes when someone doesn't recognize what's happening and mistakes this stress response for their normal way of thinking. The encouraging part is that greater self-awareness changes the relationship with the demon over time. Recognizing the early signs of overwhelming stress allows someone to step back before extroverted sensing takes over in destructive ways. They can consciously reconnect with healthier strategies instead of letting panic dictate their actions. And occasionally, the demon reveals an unexpected strength. During genuine emergencies that require immediate, decisive action, a person who rarely relies on extroverted sensing may discover they can become remarkably present and responsive when it truly matters. While it isn't a comfortable or sustainable state, learning to recognize and integrate this hidden side can transform it from something purely destructive into a reserve of resilience that only appears when every other option has been exhausted. By now, hopefully you've seen that this cognitive function never actually changed. Even in the Nemesis, Critic, Trickster, and Demon functions, it remained the same underlying cognitive process. What changed was the person's relationship with it. Rather than being trusted and consciously relied upon, it became less conscious, less trusted, and often revealed itself during moments of stress, insecurity, or psychological pressure. Understanding the shadow isn't about labeling parts of yourself as good or bad. It's about recognizing that every cognitive function has both conscious and unconscious expressions, and that becoming aware of them is an important step toward understanding both yourself and others.